You're watching Reality Check. India and the world seem to be in an inflection point in the battle against the coronavirus. Around the world, infections are rising, mainly powered by the highly infectious Delta variant, even as the spread of vaccinations remains uneven, reflecting a divide between the developing and the developed world. Joining me to talk us through how we tackle these new challenges and even to get a sense of them is Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist of the World Health Organization, WHO. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Swaminathan, for joining me. Let me just start first, if I may, Dr. Swaminathan, with just a little bit of a sense of India first. What you make of the numbers, what you make of the trends that we're seeing. We are seeing daily cases up now increasingly. More and more districts are reporting daily cases. What is called the R factor, the reproductive factor of the virus, is also gone above 1. What really are you seeing with what's going on with India, and how worried should we be?
Thank you, Srinivasan. This is something we've observed in other countries. If you look at the pattern in Latin America, for example, we do see that after they went through a very severe wave and a peak of cases, that it actually settled down at a level which was fairly constant with a little bit of up and down, never really went down to very low levels. I think that's what we're seeing now. There is some amount of endemic transmission going on in the country because we still have a large number of people who are susceptible to the infection, and the virus is getting an opportunity to spread from person to person. We, of course, know the Delta variant is highly transmissible. And so the moment it has an opportunity and there's mixing of people, this spread is going to continue. I do think we have to take a longer term view of this, because it's not like there's going to be an end at some point where cases come down to 0. That's very unlikely to happen. And so I think we have to balance the resumption of economic activities, which are absolutely necessary for people's livelihoods, and the control of the infections, which allows the health system to function, doesn't get overwhelmed. And at the same time, we have to keep deaths down to a minimum, which can be done by protecting those who are the most at high risk for severe disease and death. And that, of course, is through vaccination.
Right. Yes, vaccinations are important. I want to come to that in just a second. But I just want to understand a little bit of what you're saying. You almost seem to be suggesting, because we tend to think of the virus in terms of waves, you're talking about something which is kind of almost in perpetuity. It's going to go maybe a little up at times, a little down, but we're in it for the long haul. But just to try to simplify this for our viewers, all this talk about the fact that we might be heading for a third wave, is that something which is a likelihood? Dr. Swaminathan?
Yes, I lost you for a minute there.
Sorry.
What I was trying to say is that, yes, I mean, I think we have to accept that this virus is going to be with us now. It's probably going to be an endemic respiratory virus, just like we have influenza. We have other respiratory viruses, other coronaviruses that cause a common cold, occasionally will lead to severe cases, severe disease in some people, and some mortality, which will have to be minimized as much as possible, but then accepted. So we need to start thinking about the next few years of living with this virus and how we're going to cope. As I said, on the one hand, how's life going to resume? And when we say going back to pre-pandemic days, I think we have to start thinking about new ways of doing things where we're minimizing risk, but at the same time not being completely shut down. And yes, we can have waves if there are still enough people left in the population that are susceptible. You could still see waves and peaks, but it may start becoming more and more localized and happen in areas where people have less immunity in the population. The other thing that I think a lot of people are waiting for is herd immunity. This is again a concept which is poorly defined and which probably doesn't really help us a lot in a country like India, where people move from place to place. And so if you're moving from a place with high population immunity to a place with lower population immunity, you're susceptible again if you're not, immunized and protected yourself.
Okay.
So while we have to aim for very high levels of vaccine coverage in the population, we will still have to keep in place some of the other measures that allow individuals to stay protected and, of course, protect each other as well.
Do you anticipate a third wave in India, and what's your take on it? Is it going to be as severe as the second wave? Is there anything at all that we can say about that at this stage?
It's unlikely that the third wave is going to be as severe as the second wave. We saw that in the second wave, a huge percentage of the population was infected. This became very clear with the ICMR's fourth zero survey. And so on an average, 67%, of course, with its limitations, there are variations, of course, from state to state and even from district to district. But despite the fact that we still have about 45 crores of people who are susceptible. More and more people are getting covered with at least a single dose of the vaccine.
Right.
And so because of this previous exposure to the virus, plus increasing levels of vaccine coverage, it's very unlikely that we're going to see the kind of devastating wave as we saw a few months ago.
Right.
But again, that should not lull us into any kind of complacency.
Sure.
Because having a wave in a small town, in a rural area, can be devastating because they don't have the health facilities to cope, like what the big cities have. And so we need to really now start focusing on strengthening healthcare in those parts, which perhaps have less population immunity by the zero prevalence data, and at the same time would be very susceptible to future peaks. So I think we'll see localized peaks, some states or districts increasing, some reducing. This may go on for some time.
Okay. But, I absolutely take your point that given the vaccine coverage and all of that, it may brunt the impact. But tell us a little bit about how the Delta variant seems to be upending some of these calculations, because if you look at what's happening around the world, in America now it's 93% of all cases, even though their vaccination spread and coverage is much more than ours. China, apparently Delta has reached nearly half the country. Sydney in Australia seeing record cases, Delta cases a day, again with better percentages of vaccination.
Yeah, so this is the problem with the variants. And of course, we cannot predict what the next variant is going to look like. And this is why we need to make sure we keep transmission as low as possible so we prevent variants from forming. So on the one hand, we want to reduce the risk to people of getting sick and hospitals overwhelmed. But the other reason to keep transmission low is to prevent other variants, even more dangerous than Delta.
Right.
Delta is clearly much more transmissible. We know that one person can spread the infection to 7, 8, or even 10 people, as opposed to the original Wuhan strain, which was, one person to 2 people. And so that's why we get these explosive outbreaks. It gets also, therefore, more people get sick and end up in the hospital. We've also seen data from many vaccines now that show reduction in neutralizing activity against the Delta variant. Now, luckily for us, all of the data across all the vaccines that we have data on so far shows that they still prevent severe disease and hospitalization up to 90% of the time. But they're not preventing infection. So the hope was that the vaccines will prevent both severe disease and infection. With the Delta variant, the protection against infection is much less, maybe in the range of 40, 50, or 60%. Now, this immunity against severe disease seems to be lasting quite long, but though the neutralizing antibodies do start waning off after a period of time. So I think the big question now for all of us is, how long will this immunity protect us? When will boosters, if at all boosters are needed? In which groups will they be needed? They may be selected groups like the elderly, the immunosuppressed, etc. And what else do we need to do to keep the transmission low in addition to increasing vaccine coverage, which is, the public health and social measures? So for some time to come, we have to avoid mass gatherings, for example. we will need to open workplaces, education institutions, but there has to be a COVID protocol to do that. So these are the things we need to start putting in place, even as we try to speed up vaccination coverage as quickly as possible.
Right. You said some many important things, one of which is the fact that even though there are now multiple instances where people who've got vaccinated once, even twice, reporting getting reinfected, especially in places like America, it's still important to get vaccinated because, like you said, there's still 90% protection against critical illness or the critical impacts of the disease. It may not prevent you from getting infected, but it'll most likely prevent you from getting critically infected. So that's very important. But also on the booster shot, which is basically, do you need a third shot? You're saying the science is still not, is it correct to say it's still evolving? It's not safe, or is it advisable at this point for any country to start considering booster shots, or not yet?
There are countries considering booster shots, mainly for people at high risk. The WHO's position is very clear. We would like the vulnerable and high-risk groups in every country to be protected first, before some countries now start a booster program, third dose and fourth dose for their citizens. We have a limited stock of vaccines globally, and we've set the target of at least 10% coverage across all countries in the world by September, and 40% of the population by the end of this year in all countries to be vaccinated. This will really bring down mortality, which should be our first goal. And then we can go about vaccinating the rest of the population in 2022.
Okay.
And the science is evolving. The need boosters depends on the immune system of the host, that is the humans, and that varies from person to person. It depends on the vaccine, the type of vaccine, and what kind of immunity and how long the immunity it produces. Each vaccine type may be a little different, and it depends on the variants. So there are lots of moving pieces here, which will determine when and whether boosters are going to be needed.
Okay.
And we have to keep up with the science on that.
Now let's come to vaccinations, because I know that you've been, WHO has been very vocal about this kind of vaccine inequity, and also just in terms of the percentage of coverage of vaccines in different countries. How much of a cause of concern is it for you? Because we were just looking at the numbers, and if you see wealthy versus the not so wealthy countries, the great vaccine divide as we've called it, number of doses purchased per inhabitant, Canada, UK, EU are all in the range of 7, 8, 9, 10 doses per inhabitant. India is just all the way down at 1.7.
So this is obviously of great concern to WHO, and we've been tracking this. The inequity is huge. While some of the high-income countries, or most of the high-income countries today, have vaccinated at the rate of over 100 doses per 100 people, the lowest income countries are still at between 1 and 2 doses per 100 people. Now, the only way this can be resolved is if these that manufacture the vaccines, the producers of these vaccines, and agree to work together, agree to work with COVAX to share equitably what's available today. We have something like 4 billion doses of vaccine that have been administered worldwide. If only that had been distributed to all countries, it was more than enough to cover the most vulnerable in each country.
Right.
And we don't need to see healthcare workers dying today in many countries in Africa. So it can be solved. There's enough supply out there to cover the most vulnerable. We just need to make sure that it gets there. And COVAX is the mechanism to do that. It's set up to do that. So we're just hoping that in the next few months, there'll be more of this dose sharing that happens from countries that have excess. Right. And so that we can send it to those that still really need it urgently.
Well,
we're also, of course,
yes, go ahead.
Building more manufacturing capacity in parts of the world that don't have it. That's a more medium term. It's not going to happen overnight. But a continent like Africa currently manufactures only 1% of the vaccines that it uses on the continent. And this needs to change. Right. So for future regional health security, I think every region needs to start looking at their manufacturing and distribution capacity, both for raw materials and for finished vaccines. So India, of course, is in a very good position because of the number of vaccine developers we have. But we may face problems with raw materials that we need to address.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about that, because India is in a rather unique position since we do have our own homegrown vaccine manufacturers, but that's not enough to meet the target that the government has set. We're only able to produce about half of what our targets are. And so we've tried to reach out to some of these other big global manufacturers directly, like Pfizer, Moderna and so on. But the sense one gets from the government is essentially they're saying, we're all sold out, or we've already committed. So what we can offer you are very limited amounts of doses. What's the, I don't know what the solution to that is.
Well, the short-term solution for that, is that these companies and the countries where they are located need to really start thinking about the need for fair and equitable distribution, without which nobody is going to come out of this. Tomorrow, if a new variant comes out of a country where, a lot of people are unvaccinated, it's going to spread around the world and cause havoc, including in these high-income countries. So it's just makes common sense for everyone to ensure that it happens. And one is still hoping that at the G20 meeting that there will be some good discussion on this and some decisions taken. But I think in the medium to longer term, one really needs to start looking at not self-sufficiency country by country, but perhaps at a regional level. We're discussing with African Union, for example, how there could be African regional health security, where some countries are manufacturing the lipids that are needed for the mRNA vaccines, and other countries are manufacturing enzymes, and a third country is actually putting them together in the form of a vaccine. And I think this applies for the pharmaceutical industry in India as well. We import a lot of the raw materials, the active ingredients from other countries. But and, we've seen how these supply chains get disrupted during times of a pandemic.
Yes.
So it's good to think across the value chain.
Well, I would want to ask you about where WHO stands vis-a-vis approval for Covaxin. I know you've said, and WHO said in earlier statements and interviews, that you're considering it. Any clarity on that?
Yes. So it's absolutely in the process now. So the documents for Covaxin were uploaded sometime around the middle of July. Now normally, the pre-qualification process takes months. But because this is an emergency use listing, WHO has fast-tracked it. And it normally takes about 4 to 6 weeks if documentation is all complete. So I understand that the reviews are close to being completed. It will go to the Technical Advisory Committee, and I'm hoping there'll be some news in the next couple of weeks. I know that a huge number of Indian students are very worried, because Covaxin, once it's emergency use listed by WHO, hopefully will be acceptable to many countries for travelers and for students. So I can't give you an exact date, but I think it's going to be weeks now.
Okay, in a matter of weeks. Well, let's hope for that, because as you said, yes, there are a lot of anxious children and a lot of anxious parents waiting to fly out. But just let me ask you though about the other question which WHO has got engaged in, which is this continuing lingering question mark over China and the virus, about the origins of the pandemic, about whether it was lab created or not, and whether there's been any kind of clarity on that.
This is going to be, I think, a longer process. The search for the origins of a virus is complex, and it takes many years. In the past, other zoonotic diseases also have taken many years to determine which species and where the original virus came from. What is needed is a good collaborative scientific global effort to get to the bottom of this. And there are, of course, various possibilities. The most likely is that it jumped from an animal into the human, either through an intermediary host or directly, from bats to humans. And then there are the other options, possibilities that, the expert committee that went to China listed, which included an accidental lab leak. And of course, very unlikely. I mean, there are a lot of conspiracy theories of it having been created, but no one really has any proof at the moment, there's no proof for any of these hypotheses. You see, so hypotheses need to be tested through rigorously done studies. So at the moment, the member states of the WHO came together and discussed this and have decided to set up an expert group that will look into the origins. We will build on the work done by the previous committee that went to China. So right now, the WHO will be putting out an expression of interest for experts globally who are willing to serve on this expert panel. The panel will be created, and hopefully then we'll be able to work. Of course, one will need the cooperation of the Chinese government in order to make progress. But it is in everybody's interest to find out the origin of even if it takes a bit of time. That's the only way we can think about how to prevent the next pandemic.
Right. And about children and vaccinating children, what is your view and what is WHO's view on that? Is it too early to start, especially in India where we're still struggling to vaccinate adults, or is that something that should be considered?
So as far as children are concerned, the good thing is, and this has been corroborated now from data from many countries, that children have mild illness, that the majority of them are asymptomatic, that they do not suffer severe disease, very rare to have severe disease, or death is even more rare. And long COVID also luckily seems to be much rarer in children. And, you know, from the Sero survey of ICMR, again, the same number of children were infected as adults. 65% of India's children, at least in those sample districts, have antibodies. We saw very few severe cases and hospitalization. So this is very good news. It also means that children do not need the vaccines immediately as much as the older people do. So clearly, we have to prioritize those who are at highest risk of disease.
Right.
It's our older people, people with underlying comorbidities, etc.
Okay.
Within the children, there may be a few who have underlying illnesses that puts them at high risk, and those children should be offered the vaccine. Currently, there are two vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, that are approved for use above the age of 12. And over the next few months, I think we will see data coming out on younger children as well. So one is to wait for the data on the safety and efficacy in children through the clinical trials that are going on. I know that the Indian vaccines, Covaxin, as well as the Cadila vaccine are also undergoing pediatric trials. But then we need to prioritize the groups that should get it first. And there seems to be a belief that children have to be vaccinated before they can go back to school.
Right.
And I think this is not the case. Nobody is recommending that. As long as the adults around them are vaccinated and some precautions are taken, educational institutions can and should open.
Okay. So let me just ask you in conclusion, because to where we started, because there is so much confusion which is coming out of, I think, primarily because of the pace at which the Delta variant is spreading, especially if you look at America. There's just no clear strategy on what to do, to lock, to unlock, to lift mask mandates, to reinforce them. And of course, there's also vaccine politics and denialism that comes into the picture, but we can leave that out. But it is challenging to lay down clear guidelines, especially for a body like WHO, for how to negotiate through this maze.
So, Srinivasan, this is a really good question, and I think it needs very serious thought at the national level as well as at the state level to formulate a policy that's, as I said, we have to look ahead now for the next year or two. Nothing is going to dramatically change, and in fact, let's hope that things don't, get worse because of new variants. Let's say we don't have new variants and we keep up the vaccination schedule. We should hopefully have enough people protected by the end of the year. So at least we are confident that the hospitals are not going to get overwhelmed. What we are seeing in countries like UK, for example, is that even though infections went up a lot, the hospitalizations and deaths did not. So while one doesn't want, infections going up unnecessarily, one can still accept that, because if it's occurring mostly in children or younger people, it's not going to have that much damage. So prioritize whom to protect, how to protect, make sure vaccine coverage, address vaccine hesitancy, make sure that there are no constraints to people getting those vaccines. And at the same time, do not give up measures like mask wearing. Mask wearing is a very simple individual measure that each of us can do without going through a lot of pain,
Right.
which really helps protect ourselves and others. We know now that even if you're vaccinated, you can get the infection and spread it to other people.
Okay.
And, this is why the CDC reversed their guidance. The WHO all along said we should continue to wear masks wherever we are in a crowded place or in indoor settings with many other people. You can't be sure that everyone is vaccinated. So try to maintain distance, avoid mass gatherings, maintain good ventilation, do as much as possible outdoors. I think these are the kind of pragmatic solutions we have to find
Okay.
in the months and perhaps years ahead.
Okay. Well, let's hope for the best, and let's hope that we will start to win this battle. But thank you always, Dr. Swaminathan, for joining us. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.